Professor Morandi was here on Sunday, and he has been doing a number of interviews. If I were to guess, he's probably doing about 10 interviews a day, right? So he's very, very busy person. On top of that, the internet in Iran is not strong right now. It is fairly weak. So for his interview with Piers Morgan, he actually went to Press TV in Iran to do that interview so that the connection would be, more stable. Now that's important because there was something that happened while he was conducting that interview. You guys need to see this from Professor Morandi. I was at Press TV preparing for an interview with Piers Morgan, a notorious and dishonest genocide enabler, when Zionists bombed Iranian state media, killing journalists. Smoke was visible as they evacuated the Press TV building, but I refused to leave because of the interview. I stayed alone to defend the Iranian people. But Morgan ranted nonsense against Iran, effectively justifying murderous aggression. The supporter of child killers and journalist murderers wouldn't even let me speak. You guys are going to see that. So yeah, there's a picture there of Press TV. Again, I just want to say this. If it's really about nuclear weapons, why is Israel bombing, the press? Similar to what we saw in Gaza, because Israel doesn't want the piece of information to get out. And it also brings up another question. Did they know that Professor Morandi was going to be at Press TV? It almost kind of sounds like to me that Professor Morandi may have been a direct target. So we'll get into that a little bit more. All of this was happening at the same time. There was a woman, and from what I understand, this woman apparently is very popular in Iran. And she was speaking when the building was bombed. It was during her segment. And she walked away. I can't show that video on here, but she walked away and then she came back and continued her segment. This woman is a boss, man. Like, this is boss-like behavior, like seriously. So I want to give a shout out here to Abu Bakr Abed. He's one of the younger journalists that's been reporting from Gaza. I have actually never seen courage like this, to be bombed and then continue reporting live on TV. That's unmatched defiance and bravery. Here she is.
دقایقی پیش در ساختمان خبر صدا و سیمای جمهوری اسلامی ایران دیدیم نمونه بارز و آشکار مخالفت با آزادی بیان هستش. ساختمان خبر مورد هدف قرار نگرفت. آزادی بیان، صدای حقیقت، صدایی که صدای زنان، مردان و کودکانیه که در روزهای اخیر به شهادت رسیدند در واقع مورد هدف قرار گرفت. دشمن صهیونیستی باز هم دچار خطای محاسباتی شد در مورد نظام مقدس جمهوری اسلامی ایران. اگر دقایقی پیش
I wish I knew what she was saying, but that woman there is a boss to come back after the bombing and to continue her segment. That's all I got to say about that. That is straight up boss-like behavior, fam. So all of this was happening while Professor Morandi was also there to conduct this interview with Piers Morgan. Let's go ahead and get into it.
Well, first of all, I have to point out some nonsense that your guest said. I fought in the Iran-Iraq war as a volunteer, and I was part of the war effort for 6 years, on and off. I was wounded 4 times, and I survived 2 chemical attacks. There was no children being pushed over minefields. These are myths that Westerners, Western media, Western elites have been promoting for many years in order to demonize Iranians and to portray us as fanatic. Right?
And I think he had a little bit of
your friends, your Zionist allies, they have bombed buildings belonging to the Iranian television. I'm in one of those buildings. And the guard right now is standing outside the door telling me to leave. And I was yelling at him, telling him to go. I'm going to finish this interview. We are not intimidated by you, your government, the United States, or the Israeli regime. This was a blatant act of aggression. People were murdered in Iranian radio and television just minutes ago. And I tweeted it, and
He has a little bit of connection issues right here, but the reality is Piers Morgan can't say he didn't know because during this interview, Professor Morandi tells him that they were just bombed at Press TV. So he was very well aware of what was happening when he was conducting this interview. And once again, I got to tell you guys, I have this question. Did Israel know that Professor Morandi was at Press TV? Was this a targeted attack? And I wouldn't be surprised, if it was. Professor Morandi is probably one of the most outspoken professors in Iran that has not just been speaking out against Israel about their aggression towards Iran, but also, of course, against the genocide in Gaza. So he's well known. If we know who he is, I'm pretty sure Israel knows who he is as well. So just keep that in mind. Let's go back in here.
Our colleagues have seen it. And this building is also a target. Your allies target journalists. Your allies have murdered over 200 journalists, and you are complicit in this genocide.
Well, let me respond to that, Professor.
You repeated the lies.
Listen, I've seen you, Professor. All due respect, Professor.
You are complicit.
All due respect, Professor. I've seen you doing this kind of shtick in the last few days on all sorts of shows. And let me just respond. The reason that I actually think that Israel has a right to do what it is doing with your regime is that your regime has been the fulcrum for terrorism in the Middle East now for decades. Through Hezbollah, through the Houthis, through Hamas, it has done whatever it can do to destabilize the region, to terrorize Israel and anyone else it doesn't like. It's a draconian, oppressive, appalling regime, which is deeply unpopular with many Iranians. And every time I've seen you appear in the last few days, you've had a big smirk grin on your face, as if somehow you know better than everybody else, and that somehow we are misinterpreting your rulers and your regime, and that you're all a bunch of really nice people who have nothing but good intentions for the rest of the world, when in fact it's the complete opposite.
We're going to intervene here. This is Piers Morgan pushing regime change. As if those of us here in the United States haven't learned from the mistakes of the past. As if we didn't learn from the war in Iraq, as if we didn't learn from the intervention and the overthrow of Gaddafi in Libya, that when the US government implements regime change in these countries, the people in those countries are worse off after the change than they were before. Piers Morgan knows this, right? The reason why he's coming so hostile towards Professor Morandi, and you'll see the comparison when we get to the Mehdi interview. The reason why he's going so hard at him is because Professor Morandi calls his BS. He calls him out on it. He does not think that Piers Morgan is acting in good faith, because he's not acting in good faith. Even if you have a problem with the Iranian regime, that doesn't give Israel the right to commit a war crime and bomb them like they did. Now, he thinks that it's totally fine for Israel to do what they did to Iran. But I just want to remind you, this is the same guy for over a year, continued to tell his audience and continued to ask his guests, do you condemn Hamas? This all started on October 7th, 2023, which we have pointed out before in the show multiple times. It started long before that. Remember, the Palestinian people were not the ones to attack the Israelis from the jump. The Israelis invaded their home and their space. They were settlers. They started the Nakba. They were the ones who started pushing the people out. There's literally documentaries and video footage of the people who participated in that behavior laughing about it and bragging about sexually assaulting Palestinian women. Every accusation from Israel is a confession. Wait till we get to the BB files. I'm going to try to cover that by next week. And so you can see who Netanyahu really is. But the reality is that's what he's pushing for. He's pushing for regime change. Piers Morgan is not acting in good faith. Let's continue.
And finally, Israel has said enough. And they're coming after your nuclear capability because your own ruler, the Ayatollah, has made it clear that he would very much like to see Israel removed from this world. And if you hear that and you're in Israel, then you're going to take action to stop that happening. So to Pierce's point, because that's really not what this is about. To Pierce's point, it's not about what you did
or what you're doing. It's about what you think should happen. This is very dangerous, you guys. This is borderline Minority Report. If you've ever seen that movie, if you haven't, watch it, where these so-called predictions determine if it's predicted that you're going to do this in the future, but you haven't actually done it. And for years, I have been told that Iran was building a nuclear weapon. I've heard that since I was a kid. I mean, come on. It's 2025. That's the setup. That's the setup to get you prepared for the U.S. wanting to go to war with Iran on the behalf of Israel and U.S. as well, because they want the oil. We talked about this with Professor Morandi, all the oil that's around Iran. They want control of that. And let me ask you a question. What happens if Israel has an attack in Iran and it affects one of the oil rigs? What happens if it affects that resource? Did anybody think about that? Did anybody think about the fact, like, if Israel were to, or if the US government were to try to like nuke Iran, did anybody think about like the chemicals that would spread across the area because of that? You wouldn't be able to use those resources anyway. Nobody's asking about this. Nobody's talking about it. Nobody's talking about how the price of gas would skyrocket, which would impact us. For the people who say, I don't care about foreign policy, I just want to focus on domestic, that would impact us. Nobody's talking about that. So it's just really interesting here, because this is what Piers Morgan does. He is there to defend Israel. That show is not independent. We've covered this before on the show. That show is not independent. He made it very clear that Rupert Murdoch was his mentor. Rupert Murdoch is a Zionist billionaire who was buddies with Benjamin Netanyahu. And we're not supposed to believe that affects Piers Morgan's reporting? Come on, man.
That would be my response to you.
Well, if your rant is over, I point out that you are a dishonest person and a dishonest so-called journalist.
You can do ad hominem stuff as much as you like.
But you were too cowardly. Be quiet for a moment. Be quiet for a moment and let me speak.
You don't tell me how to behave on my own show. If you're going to call me a coward, and a liar, then I won't be quiet on my own show. Especially not from someone like you who spews disinformation.
I am the one in this building that has been evacuated, and I'm only sitting here because of you. So allow me to speak.
Well, keep the ad hominem attacks to yourself then. If you're going to call me a liar and a coward, I'm going to jump in and take you on. So show some respect or don't bother.
You are a coward. You are a coward. You did not come to Iran when I invited you, so you have no right to.
I wouldn't trust going to Iran. Why on earth would I trust going to Iran? As your guest,
your guest said nonsense about.
As your guest in Iran, with your contacts with the Iranian regime. I wouldn't trust that as far as I can throw it.
So don't comment about Iran if you don't come here.
Well, let me give you some facts about your country. Let me give you some facts to see where I'm wrong here. Women face severe restrictions when it comes to marriage, divorce, inheritance, child custody, and so on. Compulsory veiling, punishable by flogging and prison sentences.
Let me just comment here for a second, because now all of a sudden it's let's talk about and care about women, right? So Professor Morandi invites you to Iran and says, come see the country for yourself. You don't want to do that. He had no problem going to Israel. He's not going to do that because then that wouldn't fit his narrative. If he goes to Iran like Max Blumenthal did, Max Blumenthal went there, then that would not fit well with Piers Morgan's narrative. That's why he doesn't want to go there. Piers Morgan is basically a puppet for the empire. He's a puppet for war. He's a puppet for genocide. He's a puppet for starvation. Like, that's what Piers Morgan is. He's a puppet, and he's put there and it's designed to make you believe that his show is independent. It's not independent. It's not. I'm independent. I think you guys can tell. You can look at the shows and you can kind of tell which one of us are independent and who's not. So put 2 and 2 together here. So he doesn't want to do that. So he has issues with the laws in Iran. Okay, fine, whatever. That is not of your concern. You don't live in Iran. See, this is the problem that the West tends to have. It is not your place to tell other countries what their laws should and should not be, whether you like them or not. He brings up women. Women face restrictions. Women have issues in this country. Women have issues in the United States. I mean, come on. Like, get out of here. Women aren't even paid. Are you serious? Address your own issues. Address the issues you guys have in the UK. Maybe you should focus on that instead of, oh, I'm just going to shame Iran, but I don't want to go there. He invited you to go there and you don't want to go because it does not fit the narrative that Piers Morgan has for that show. Now, all of a sudden, everybody care about women. This is the part that's really funny to me, okay? And I'm so glad people aren't falling for this because people are not stupid. This is the problem that I have. All of a sudden, when it comes to Muslim countries, all of a sudden, Western propagandists care about women. But when things happen to women in Western countries, they don't give a fuck. Pay attention to what is happening.
Women punished for bad dressing, defined as exposing any body parts below the neck. Women banned from certain professions. They can't be judges. They can't be They can't be in certain positions in government. A ban on independent political parties, civil society organizations, trade unions. LGBT people suffer systematic discrimination and violence. Closing shops that have so-called improperly veiled customers. Authorities censor media, jam certain television channels, continue to block or filter mobile apps, social media platforms. Executions, including those of children, torture and other ill treatment are widespread and systematic. State television can often air torture-tainted confessions, arresting and sentencing people who break fast during Ramadan. Anyone who speaks out protests against the regime can be subjected to the death penalty, flogging, prison terms and other severe penalties. It doesn't sound like a great place for me to visit, with all due respect, Professor Morandi. So you can tell me that I'm a coward and I'm a liar, and I can tell you that you prop up, personally, you go on the airwaves and you disingenuously prop up and grotesquely defend a terrible regime, which is now getting, as many people see, its final comeuppance for constantly threatening Israel with getting a bomb and taking it out. And that's what this is about. You know it and I know it. And you also...
So here's the thing. Again, that is not of his concern. That is not of Israel's concern. None of that gives Israel the right to strike Iran. That was a war crime. That is against international law. And instead of acknowledging that Israel has been committing war crimes, that they have been going against international law, Piers Morgan decides to deflect and let's focus on what's happening in some of these Muslim countries. Again, we want to reiterate, Israel took the first strike. Israel threw hands and then cried afterwards when they were punched back. And I said before, you can't be out there throwing hands and not expect to get punched back. Again, it's like someone standing in front of you and constantly slapping you in the face. And Piers Morgan is over here telling you, don't hit them back. Like that. This is just ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. We'll go on a little bit more here.
So know that your regime has propped up the Houthis and Hezbollah and Hamas. It has been the octopus with its tentacles of terrorism spreading all over the Middle East.
He's going to leave out the fact that it was Benjamin Netanyahu that funded Hamas. Where do you think Hamas? He leaves that out. So these organizations, these groups that Piers Morgan just mentioned, these groups do not form without Western intervention, without oppression, without, crazy wars, without, that's where the groups come from. If the West would leave these countries alone, these things wouldn't even be a thing. Why do you think you get an Ansar Allah, you get the Houthis in Yemen? I don't know, probably because the US government was giving weapons to Saudi Arabia to slaughter the Yemenis people. Have you seen pictures of Yemen? Have you seen what Saudi Arabia did to Yemen? Are you kidding me? That's how you get that group. You get an ISIS because the West decided to take out Saddam Hussein. These excuses are all the same. So-and-so's a dictator. They may have weapons of mass destruction. They're trying to build a nuclear weapon. They kept coming up with the same things every single time as a reason to intervene and to take over. You don't get those groups without that. You don't get a Hamas without the Palestinian people not being caged in and occupied and oppressed, and Israel going into Gaza, mowing the lawn. You don't get a Hamas unless you're doing that. So he's paid propaganda. This is propaganda coming from Piers Morgan. And for him to sit up here and just pretend like everything is just on Iran, whether you agree with the regime or not, that has nothing to do with Israel choosing to strike Iran when Iran was just chilling, minding its own business. Spare me that BS with these plans of building a nuclear weapon when that has been debunked by people in Donald Trump's cabinet. But he won't mention that.
So you can call me what you like, but what you can't do is deny what I've just said.
You are a coward.
So you keep saying. So you keep saying.
You are a coward.
That's all you can say, isn't it? That's all you've got. That's all you've got. Do one of your smug grins.
You helped enable genocide in Gaza for 2 months. You don't want to let me talk. You don't want me to talk.
I do, but if all you're going to do is call me a coward and a liar, then why should I keep listening to that? Pointless. It's what you've been doing on the airwaves for days.
You say not because you say nonsense.
Really? What was nonsense about anything? What was nonsense about anything I said?
Everything. But you just rant on, and you think this way you can convince your audience that while your allies are murdering Iranians, while your allies have murdered.
Yes. So he has multiple interruptions there, but it's very clear like what Piers Morgan's role is. And I told you guys before, be very wary of the people who say they're independent and they're not independent. Like there's been a lot of people posing out there pretending like they're independent and they're not. So pay very close attention to that. It is absolutely insane to want to go to war with Iran. So after the interview, Professor Morandi asked him again. He said, "You were too cowardly to accept my invitation to visit the country. You refused to open your eyes. It's too inconvenient. So keep repeating the propaganda that keeps you on air. But you will be remembered as a dishonest genocide enabler, a supporter of ethno-supremacism." Yeah, which is exactly what Piers Morgan is. And Piers Morgan said here, Iran is full of great people, sadly betrayed by a regime that makes their lives hell, and you defend that hell. Again, once again, here we have a European trying to decide what should happen in a Middle Eastern country. Once again. Now, it wasn't just Professor Morandi. We'll get to Mehdi Hasan in just a second, but I want you to hear what Professor Morandi said on George Galloway's show, that he's basically, I guess, been identified as a moving target. Listen to this.
To be very blunt, I've been asked to get rid of my cell phone, but I can't because that's how I work with the media. And so I'm facing a dilemma because I can no longer stay with my family or stay at my apartment building because I don't want to risk people in that building, because the Israeli regime, when they target someone, they target the entire building, bring it down. Just a couple of nights ago, they killed 65 people in a single building, something that the West doesn't care about, Western media, Western regimes. And today, 10 children were murdered in another building, and the list goes on. So this is how the United States and the collective West work together to help this genocidal regime carry out death and destruction, whether in Gaza, whether in Beirut or whether in Tehran, to be very blunt.
So this is Professor Morandi letting everyone know that apparently it's not safe for him to even stay with his family. So he's been kind of identified as a moving target. This is crazy. Like I said, if this is about nuclear weapons, why are they going after the press, right? Why are they bombing Press TV? Why are they going after people like Professor Morandi? Like, let's put two and two together. But it wasn't just him. Mehdi Hassan came on later to correct Piers Morgan. And I want you to see the difference between the two here, because I think the difference is Mehdi here still believes that I believes that Piers is acting in good faith. Listen to this.
Because you described it accurately a moment ago, what the report says. I've read the 22-page report, came out May 31st, declassified. But on Friday, I was disappointed to see you tweeting about, you said the report exposes an imminent nuclear threat from Iran, which could justify a preemptive strike. What we saw on Thursday night from Israel was not a preemptive strike. It was a preventive strike, which is illegal under international law. It's what George Bush and the neocons claimed the Iraq war was against Saddam Hussein, which you and I opposed, rightly so. And that IAEA report does not expose an imminent nuclear threat. It says what you just said it says. It says that they haven't been cooperating very well. It says their level of cooperation has been, quote, less than satisfactory. It says some of their technical answers about their program have lacked credibility. It says they've impeded some of the inspectors. It says that they were working on some kind of military program pre-2003, which is what US intelligence has also said. Those are all bad things, Piers. You and I can both agree those are bad things, and Iran should not be doing those things. And the IAEA board voted to say they're in breach of their obligations. But that's not an imminent nuclear threat. The report does not say Iran poses an imminent nuclear threat. Your tweet was wrong on Friday.
I think it's as I just said.
Nuclear.
No, Mehdi is right here. Listen, I've had disagreements with Mehdi Hassan, but Mehdi is correct here. That's not what it says. And what's interesting about all this is that even Tulsi Gabbard testified about this in March of this year and said that Iran is not building a nuclear weapon. And I don't know if you guys have noticed, but Tulsi has been pretty quiet since everything that's been going down. So pay attention to what is happening here. I wonder how long before she departs from Trump's administration. So they're not building a nuclear weapon, right? So listen to what Piers says after that.
But when he says 60% enrichment of uranium, it's the next stage that somebody who wants to create a nuclear bomb, right? So imminent, look, what do I mean by imminent? As I said in the panel, it can be weeks, months, a year, whatever, but they've reached a stage of enrichment.
No, it can't, Piers.
But they have the capability to take it to another stage and create a bomb.
Yes.
Let's talk about what it means to have the ability to do something. To Pierce's point, again, this reminds me of Minority Report. The idea that you could do something that you have not done yet. This is very dangerous. Is that where we're headed as a society? So for those of you who are gun owners, let's talk about this for a second. Those of you who ride for the Second Amendment, and I am pro Second Amendment. For those of you who are gun owners, because you own a gun, does that mean that you're going to go out into the street and you're going to use that gun on people, that you're going to harm someone, you're going to shoot someone with the gun? Does that mean that's going to happen? But you have a gun, you have one, you own it. It's possible. It's a possibility that you could do it, but you didn't do it. But you could. That's the danger with that. You're talking about things that could happen, but they have not happened. At the same time, and I've said this before as well, Iran is in a position where it's like, if I was Iran, I'd kind of look around and be like, okay, so all these other countries around, they can have nuclear weapons, but we can't. And you know how you really shut this down? This is how you know that the war machine has exposed itself. The way that you shut this down is everyone with a nuclear weapon disarms it. Everyone. You remove nuclear weapons. That's how you shut it down. But they don't want to remove nuclear weapons. They don't want to remove them. So this, it could happen, but hasn't happened. That's dangerous. Very dangerous. Let's continue.
So let's find more agreement between us.
Yeah.
I agree. That is capability, right? They have enough highly enriched uranium to build up to 9 bombs, I believe. They have 400 kilograms of uranium.
So that is an imminent threat if it's in the wrong hands, right? We can agree on that.
No, it's not. No, it's no.
But why not?
No, because unfortunately, having a civil nuclear program is totally fine. Having enriched uranium is fine. The issue is if you weaponize it and have a weapons program. And Tulsi Gabbard, no friend of radical Islam, Donald Trump's director of national intelligence, said in March that the U.S. intelligence community's consensus view is that Iran is not building a nuclear weapon, does not have a nuclear weapon, has not authorized a nuclear weapons program. The IAEA, Piers, in that report, you must have seen the line in their summary, said there are no credible indications of an ongoing, undeclared, structured nuclear program. Even the IAEA says there's no nuclear weapons program. Their boss, the IAEA chief, Piers, said last week, you cannot attack nuclear facilities in Iran. So, no, it's not an imminent threat. And under international law, Piers, this is the key point. If a weapon is a year away, you cannot say we're under imminent threat. That does not give you a right to self-defense. Otherwise, everyone in the world would go around just bombing people. You and I oppose Russia's invasion of Ukraine. We agree on that, right? Putin claimed that Ukraine would one day attack Russia with NATO support. That's why I'm doing it. That was a bullshit argument. You and I rejected Putin's bullshit argument in Ukraine. You and I have rejected the Israeli bullshit argument now in Gaza. You don't believe what they're saying about Gaza. I don't know why you're believing them on this when you were rightly calling out the bullshit from the UK and the US in 2003 over Iraq. Saddam Hussein was not an imminent threat, and Iran was not an imminent threat, and Israel attacked them illegally last week while there were nuclear negotiations going on. Piers, one last point. If Israel cared about stopping a nuclear weapon, you would go back into a nuclear deal that prevents Iran from a weapon. And guess who they killed on Thursday night? Not just generals, Piers. They killed Ali Shamkhani, the lead nuclear negotiator who was supposed to be in Oman yesterday with the Americans and who went on NBC a month ago and said, we're very close to a deal. We're willing to give up highly enriched uranium.
But Trump did say, didn't he? Trump did say, but hang on, on the deal, Trump said, look, you've got 60 days, right? And Israel attacked.
So here he comes in, right, to bring in what Trump said, right? First of all, Trump is crashing out right now, so you probably shouldn't be going by what Trump says. But number two, they were supposed to meet on Sunday. They were supposed to meet on Sunday, and Israel attacked them Thursday evening. So Piers doesn't want to mention that part. The problem, I just wanted you to see the difference between the two, what Mehdi is doing and what Professor Morandi is doing, both disagreeing with Piers. But Mehdi is pretending as though Piers Morgan is acting in good faith, and he's not. The reason why he doesn't agree with you with what you're saying about Iran is because that's not his narrative. His narrative, and has been this way for quite some time, is to convince people that the Iranian people are dangerous, that Islam is dangerous, etc. That is his narrative. He's a pro-Israel propagandist. That's why he does not agree with what Mehdi Hassan is saying here. And even though he's starting to push back more on Gaza with Israel not doing targeted attacks and killing all the children and the women and starving people, let's not forget he did not do that until it was more convenient to do so after Donald Trump won. And it was even a couple of months after that that he decided to do it. So let's not forget that Piers, under the Biden administration, continued to gaslight people and tell people that Israel was targeting Hamas and asking people if they condemn Hamas. So let's not forget that. And that's what people really need to take away from this. You cannot, when it comes to these particular conflicts, you cannot look at this and assume that Piers Morgan is acting in good faith. He's not. His mentor was Rupert Murdoch. Rupert Murdoch, the billionaire who owns Fox News. Rupert Murdoch is a proud Zionist. Rupert Murdoch is friends with Benjamin Netanyahu. I do not want people to be deceived, but I think from what I've been seeing from the comments, et cetera, I think we're heading in a good direction, because I don't think, people are not stupid. People are showing that they don't want this. They don't want the U.S. to go to war with Iran. They're tired of these freaking wars. And I'm seeing that from people on both sides of the aisle. Now, I say people, not necessarily the politicians and the leadership, because when it comes to the leadership, that's not heading in that direction. Because the GOP leadership, the way Trump is talking right now, ready to go full speed ahead. The Democratic Party leadership, Chuck Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries, have been very silent. So when you look at history and you know what General Clark said, about the 7 countries, then you understand that this was decided over 20 years ago, that the US government was going to go to war with Iran. With nuclear weapons or not, whether or not Iran was trying to develop a nuclear weapon, it didn't matter. They were going to feed you that information to convince you that is what they were doing. And people, I think, more so are waking up because of the Iraq war, how they fed us this lie over and over again that Saddam Hussein had weapons of mass destruction. They lied, and your friends, your family members, your comrades went to Iraq and died on a lie. So remember that. Hey guys, this was a Sabby clip. If you like what you saw, hit that like button and subscribe.